Hi and welcome. Today we're talking birth stories, how to write birth stories, baby stories, pregnancy stories. The show comes to you thanks to the Structure Success video training, which is a free training to come up with an outline of your chapters for your life story book. If you haven't come across Forever Young autobiographies, it's the place where we learn to write life stories for family and friends so unique memories can live on. And it'd be wonderful if you could follow, subscribe, like the show and share it with a friend if you think they're going to find it of value. So in my family, we've just come off the run of many birthdays. It's been a very big season for birthdays for us. And we've recently had Easter and sort of have this feeling of renewal, of new beginnings. So I thought birth stories was a really good topic for this week's show. And a birth story is essential when you're writing an autobiography, a memoir, a biography or other life story project. It's actually really important for autobiographies because this is a story of a complete life from birth to present. But we can use birth stories in many situations, not just about, say, our own birth, but we can write birth stories about our parents' births. Also to do with our siblings, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, it goes on. So today I've got some tips on how to start these stories and make sure they're interesting and captivating for your reader. So let's get started by talking a little bit about that gathering of source material. Because the number one question, or a question I keep getting over and over again to do with birth stories, is people come to me and say, look, I wasn't there at that birth. How would I know? Or I was too young to remember, or I just simply can't recall. And there's some sources of information that you can go to help you gather some key information before you sit down to write birth stories. Now, the key places that I would recommend, depending on what time you're thinking of, is to go look at the newspapers of the time. In Australia, we've got this wonderful resource called Trove, Trove. It's on the internet with all the digitalised papers of newspapers in time. And you can search these for key names and lots comes up. If, say, the family's put in a birth announcement, all that kind of thing, and maybe there's even a write-up about that birth in the paper from that date. So always go back and check online newspapers, or maybe you've got some clippings in your house or your Trove, or your family members got some clippings. So always look for the newspapers, they're great for information. Then you might have some old photos. These are great for descriptive qualities. So have a look in your albums or loved ones' albums. Likewise, see in those treasure troves, there might be some information from the hospital. You might get those little cards with the measurements, or there might be some cards from relatives. There's lots of details that might be popping up in those treasure troves. Look for the hospital records. And you might even be able to visit the hospital. I don't know what it's like in your town or that area, but sometimes they have records or a historical arm to the hospital. So go and have a look there. Of course, talk to others who were at the birth or around that time who heard about the birth. Get their details, so go and interview them. And then simply mine your own memories if you can. If you were there, just see what you can dredge up little by little. By looking through these other sources, memories may come to the surface. So let's start at the beginning, how to write a birth story. So first of all, like I said, newspapers are great for these. I've been editing at newspapers for a long time, and birth stories were super interesting. Not just for the families that were involved, but other readers loved them. And do you know why they loved them? It wasn't just the cute pictures or how big that baby was. They were really interested in them for the stories behind the story. They loved to find out more than just the key birth information. And so I want to sort of encourage you by giving some ideas of what you could write about to start a birth story. So we can start with some information about the parents. Introduce them. These are characters in your stories. And then you can sort of say whether this pregnancy was planned or unplanned. How did the pregnancy go? Was it smooth or not? And then you can talk about the trip to the hospital, or perhaps it was a home birth. Put that all in. And also describe what was going on in the wider context, maybe in the town or in that country or in the greater world. Was it wartime? Some babies were born during war and it was very unusual. I do have to make a special point here because some births are painful to talk about, and I'm not a doctor, and if talking about such things or bringing up memories is causing you harm, I highly recommend that you seek some help. So please, I don't want this to be a painful process for you. So once we've got the beginning of our story started, we're moving on to the middle. So this is going to be the birth. And depending on how much you want to share or don't want to share, it's going to be completely personal. But I would keep in mind, number one, who are you writing this for? That's really going to dictate or inform what you're going to leave in and what you're going to leave out. The second thing you're going to want to keep in mind is the time that you're writing for. So what was normal in one generation could be completely abnormal in the next or further down the track. I'm thinking, say, pain relief. Back in the day, there wasn't any pain relief, but these days we have lots of options. And that lack of pain relief might be really interesting to today's generations and future generations. So think about the generations who are going to be reading this and what's usual or unusual with hindsight. So some things or some ideas you could write about to do with the birth would be to talk about the labour if you're inclined. Talk about the labour. Was there any complications or was it smooth? What about that pain relief? Was it accessible or was it not accessible? What options were there? Also, who was in the room? Sometimes fathers weren't invited into the room. Maybe there was a midwife, maybe there was a doctor, or maybe you were on your own. Who knows? So put that in. Also, you'd want to talk about the baby. Of course, we don't want to overlook the baby. We need to include facts about the baby. So what time did it arrive? What was the date? Again, put in all these weights and measurements. That everybody loves those. And especially put in the full name. We need to know this baby's full name. So up until this point, we've got a great beginning, we've got a really good middle, and now we just need to fill in the rest of the puzzle. We need to give this birth story a strong ending. Now, there's lots of things we can add still. Don't go away. Keep going with me. The things that we'd want to explain, these are some ideas. We're going to explain the name. How did we come up? How did the parents come up with that name? There's often great stories linked to names, family stories, so put that in. We also want to know your reaction to the baby. This might be a fantastic birth, or you might be really flawed. Oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting this baby. And then you can put reactions from others in the family. So make sure that all goes in too. Give a description of the baby here. This is great. Like, what did it look like? Was it showing any characteristics at this point? You've got to also then put in, I would say, a bit about mum. How's mum going at this point after the birth? How's she going with this baby? Was it her first? Was it her fifth? Put in a bit about how mum is reacting and how mum is feeling after the birth. Then you could document the emotions at the time and any other reflections you want to make, guiding messages, and any final words about this birth. So now we have a story that has a clear start, a middle, and an end. And so that's basically, I'd like to say, everything you need to know about writing the birth of a child or giving birth. And the aim of this is so that you will write your own baby story that captivates a reader. So to recap, we talked about the sources you go to get some key information that allows you to write a strong beginning about introducing the characters and pre-birth. Then we go to the middle, which is all about the labour, and then we finish that off with, the baby and everybody's reactions. So that will make a really nice, complete story. Now this article or this show is just an overview of an article about this topic at my website, and you can go to that, get some more information, see all those suggestions in print so you can take note, and that is at foreveryoungautobiographie.com/baby stories, and that's baby stories, one word, but I will leave the links for you in the show notes, so please look out for that. Also, leave me a comment. What birth story have you got in mind to write about? Let's share it. I'd love to hear. Leave me a comment or email me anytime to do with life stories at foreveryoungautobiographies.com/contact. So that earlier I mentioned that free training. It's a video training about coming up with a rough outline for your book. If you've made it this far in this show, I highly recommend you check it out. You can go to foreveryoungautobiographies.com/structure success sign up. Again, all the links will be in the show notes. And in this video, it's some simple exercises. I go through them with you to come up with key memories and key events. And then we pull it all together to make a nice outline of chapters for your book so you can really start writing. I'll be back again soon with another topic on life stories, and you should be following, subscribing and liking the show so I can tell you when this comes out. So please do that, and until then everyone, happy writing.